All right. Hello, everybody. This is Kate Grinold, and this is her capstone presentation. So, Kate, take it away.
I did my presentation on English and Western horseback riding and the difference between the two. So horseback riding comes with two main disciplines, which are Western and English. Western riding is seen more as like a laid back type of riding, while English has more energetic like activities and energetic horses. Western and English use two different types of tack on their horses. Western horses are usually more bulkier and built stronger to stabilize themselves in their activities, while English horses are more lean yet fit to stabilize themselves in their type of activities. The type of activities that are seen in Western would be horsemanship, Western pleasure, reining, cutting, roping, a working cow horse, which is just like if you're on a farm and you would have a horse that would, get the cows together or, get them in a different area, something like that. And then trail would just be just riding in the trails. For the English discipline, you'd have show jumping, eventing, which includes cross country, show jumping, and dressage. Dressage is kind of seen as like the dancing thing that horses do, so it's like really fancy. You have polo, which is the sticks and like the balls, and then saddle seat, English pleasure, and hunting. There's two different, breeds for each discipline. In English riding, you'd see like a thoroughbred, warm blood, an ovarian, appendix, and the majority of ponies. These breeds are very popular in English riding because they have the build and energy for that is used in the English activities. And in Western riding, you usually see the breed American quarter horse. In Western riding, there's a lot of sharp turns and difficult patterns that riders have to perform. And with this breed and their muscular build, riders feel more stabilized and confident performing those things. To the left, well, I don't know, it might be opposite, but the brown horse is a English horse, and that is a warm blood, and you can kind of see that it has a slimmer build to it. I don't know, you don't really know a lot about horses, so you probably don't see any difference, but they're more leggy and kind of slimmer. And then the brown or black horse, you could say, has more stubby and shorter legs and a bigger muscular build. And the shorter legs help them, take the turns for like the harder things in Western riding, like barrels and cow cutting, when they have to turn all of a sudden or do the sharp turns. So they have that kind of compact build. And then the English horses have the longer legs and kind of more of a lengthy build to, jump the jumps and kind of move out and use the pace that they need for the certain activities. Tack. The biggest difference between Western and English tack is the amount of material involved. English saddles have less material and leather because riders need to feel more of the horse's movement. This is because English riders tend to control the horse with their body over just their hands. Western saddles contain more leather and material because when riders run barrels or chase cows, they are looking for more material to keep them centered in the tack, which prevents them losing balance. A big difference in the Western and English saddle is the horn in front of the Western saddle. Western riders use the horn to stabilize themselves during cow cutting or barrels by holding onto it when horses take sharp turns. English saddles do not have a horn on their saddles because when show jumping riders lift their bodies off the horse's back and onto their necks to give the horse full movement over the jump. So, for example, at the top, you can see the horse jumping and the riders lifted onto the neck, and they have no, block in the front, so they could do that because the horse needs, as much movement and capability to get over the jump. So the rider's kind of helping the horse from taking all the weight off of its back. And then you could see the barrel horse on the bottom. You could actually see the girl holding onto the horn in the front of the tack while the horse is going around the barrel. This is because the horse takes very sharp turns, and this kind of keeps the rider up and centered in the tack so the horse does not trip or fall over. There's the movement between a Western horse and English horse are also very different. An English horse is expected to have a long, flowing, and consistent movement when being ridden. This would include a variation of speed, fanciness, and collection. A Western horse is expected to move in a low, relaxed movement while looking smooth. They're expected to stay like that unless they are being ridden in some of the high-paced activities. So when they would move low and relaxed, it would be more of like a Western pleasure thing. And then when they'd be at a high-paced activity, that'd be like cutting or roping, which I'm sure you all know roping, and then cutting, if I didn't say that, and barrels, which I said, barrel racing and cutting. And then even though this may not look as collected, it might look a little crazier, the horse has to be locked in with the rider to perform at its best. They have to work together and be in sync with each other, or they may knock a barrel or miss a cow. And these are my citations.
All right, questions for Miss Kate?
Did a great job. That was awesome.
That was really good, Kate. A lot of info.
Yeah, great.
Kate?
Yeah.
What's your favorite breed of horse?
I would say an appendix, because that's what I ride. I ride that. So I like the appendix. It's kind of a mix between the quarter horse and the thoroughbred, which is a mix between, you know, I said a thoroughbred was an English horse, and then the quarter horse is a Western horse. So it kind of can do both. It has capabilities of, you know, doing the Western things and the English things. So that's probably my favorite.
How long have you been riding?
I'd say 10 years now, or no, I'd say 8.
Will you continue?
Here and there. I'm actually going to ride after this.
Great. Good for you. Thanks, Kate. That was really good.
Yeah.
Really. How long do you have to train in order to do a barrel racing type person?
It depends on each person and the horse. If you have a horse who doesn't know a lot about barrels and that kind of stuff, you have to train it for a long time, and then you have to train yourself to get used to that horse and how it moves and how it does things. So it could take as long as it needs to take.
Nice. Good job, Kate.
Nice job. Really cool presentation. What did you like? So you just did this capstone for a semester. Thinking about just like the doing a capstone project. What did you learn about yourself as a learner by doing this project?
I would say that I like to put off things, but I always get it done. But I think I learned that it could be easier, you know, separating and doing things, you know, separated, because it's gonna cause less, you know, issues. But I don't know. I guess it's just how I've done things for so long. It's just like keep that pattern. But,
What's a positive takeaway you have from like doing the capstone project?
I would say learning more about my topic and just like learning how to spread things out and do things, you know, here and there to get like a good solid project on things that I like to do.
Great.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Kate?
No.
Okay.
Good job.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the introduction, Ms. Felici. I'm sorry that I cannot be with you in person today. I was inspired by my brother Billy to do this project. He was born with a genetic disorder called Sidereus Hamel syndrome, which makes life challenging for him.
Miss Khaleesi, can you stop it? I'm gonna try and put it on somewhere else.
What's the matter?
Can you stop it? Apparently it can't. I'll put it on somewhere else.
Hold on a second. Is it people are having a hard time hearing?
Yeah, there's no sound.
There's no sound. Try now. Hold on.
Will turn 22 and graduate from his school.
Can you hear it now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll start it over. Here. All right. So this is Colby Ambroziak, and this is his capstone presentation.
Thank you for the introduction, Miss Khaleesi.
Miss Khaleesi, can you unmute yourself? If you unmute yourself, that way people could hear it.
Here's a picture of us when we were little. He's 11 months older than me, but I sometimes feel like I am the older brother. I help him with simple tasks that are hard for him, like opening a drink and turning on his computer. Here's a picture of his school, Milestones, in Milford. He doesn't learn things that we focus on at GHS, like math and science. He practices tasks like brushing his teeth, opening his lunchbox, and putting on clothes. In just 2.5 years, Billy will turn 22 and graduate from his school. When the school bus stops coming for him, we will have to figure out how he will spend his days and where he will eventually live. Although he has been working hard at school, he will never be able to function at a real job. We will need to figure out a place where he will feel comfortable living someday. Unfortunately, finding a place for a person like my brother to live is harder than you might think. Most of the places that offer assisted living for people with developmental disabilities do not have openings. There are many places in the area that you may have heard of that offer services for people like Billy. But when I called them and let them know I was looking for somewhere for my brother to live, most tried to brush me off instead of letting me come for a look. Sarah wasn't interested. Chapel Haven? No. Vista? No. Horizons? No. Sarah? No. But one organization came through. Ben Haven welcomed me to come for a tour of some of their small group homes in North Haven. I was grateful for their time and impressed with how they run things. Since I wasn't able to get into a lot of places to report on, I thought it would be interesting to present a brief timeline of how people like my brother were cared for in the United States for the last 300 years or so. In the 1700s, children with special needs kept at home if their families were able to take care of them. Otherwise, the state would pay private citizens to take care of them for a small amount of money. The conditions they lived in were usually poor. There are reports that these people were typically given enough food to survive, but were left to themselves in people's spare rooms or basements instead of being treated like family. In the early 1800s, almshouses were created for people with intellectual disabilities. Others living in these places were people with mental illness, orphans, and poor people. I was able to find photos and artwork depicting some of these almshouses, either the way they looked in the 1800s or how they look now, hundreds of years later. Most of these almshouses were situated on farms so that the people who were capable of working could do so. The food they harvest was fed to the people living in the almshouse. The extra food was usually sold to help cover the expenses of maintaining the almshouse. Typical expenses were repairs to the house, payroll for employees, healthcare, etc. This building still stands in Middletown, though it is now used for private office space. It is the oldest surviving building built for the poor in Connecticut. It was constructed in 1813. Now the Pequot Golf Club. This building used to house the insane, the disabled, and the poor. 371 people had been admitted from 1868 to 1955. By 1955, improved facilities for the disabled were available. Other types of welfare assistance was available for the poor, so the farm was closed. People living at this almshouse who were capable of working on the farm produced eggs, vegetables, tobacco, and dairy products. Fun fact, the last two varieties of cheese sold were almshouse cheese and Colby cheese. This place, established in the 1800s, was originally set on 56 acres of farmland. When the farm was closed in the 1950s, the name was changed to East Hampton Lodging House. It is the only almshouse for the poor that is still in operation in the U.S. In the middle of the 1800s, there was a shift from keeping people with disabilities in almshouses to educating them. The theory of the time was that if you educated these children, you could cure them of their disabilities. State schools and institutions were built for this purpose of educating the developmentally disabled. Here's a sketch of the Berry School. Here's another school built just for educating boys with developmental disabilities in Massachusetts. The name seems disrespectful, but those were terms that were commonly used back then. This school later became the Walter E. Fernald State School. The Elwyn Training School looks kind of fancy and nice, but eventually they moved from educating people with the disabilities to sterilizing. They reported that 70% of females and 78% of males who had been sterilized showed improvement in habits and mentality. This was very bad science. Established in 1888, this school later became a training school at Vineland. In the late 1800s, the theory of curing people of their developmental disability education seemed to be failing. And the state schools were turned into asylums where people were just housed, but no longer educated. Remember this place? People started dumping their kids without developmental disabilities here if they couldn't afford to keep them or just didn't want them. They ended up doing most of the farming and work around the state school that the people with disabilities couldn't do. Unethical experiments were conducted on residents in this place. No consent was given by their parents. They were offered spots in the MIT Science Club and were given special presents and extra food. They were given large amounts of Quaker oats laced with radioactive calcium, and data was collected to learn about their digestive system and osteoporosis. Here is a brief clip showing what happened to people who were unlucky enough to end up there. This first clip introduces us to Fred Boyce.
Lost her mother died, and the state of Massachusetts committed him to Grinold. Fred's records from Grinold show they labeled him as a moron, even though tests showed his intelligence was within the normal range. Not bad for a boy with no education at all. Do you know why the state recommended that you come here? It was the easy way out. They didn't have to look for homes for you, so they could just dump you off in the warehouses and just let you rot, you know? And that's what they did. They let it over us. They said you were feeble-minded. Yeah, you weren't feeble-minded. They kept you here 11 years of the most precious time that you had as a child. Most of the school is closed now, including Fred Boyce's old dorms. They'll be torn down soon, the relics of a childhood without John. About 36 children slept in each room with the beds jammed together. The children received a little education and less affection. And how long would they stay at Grinold? The kids were told they could be here for life. I kind of thought for a while maybe there was something wrong with me.
That poor guy didn't have a disability, but he was practically a slave at this place. Here's another short clip about Fred's friend, Joe Almeida, who had a similar fate.
Relics of a childhood without joy. About 36 children slept in each room with the beds jammed together. The children received a little education and less affection. And how long would they stay at Grinold? The kids were told they could be here for life. I kind of thought for a while maybe there was something wrong with me. Well, why would I be here? There was, in fact, nothing wrong with Joe Almeida, but that didn't prevent him from getting swept up in the system. He was an abused child, and when he was 8, his father took him for a drive to the Grinold school and told him to wait in the hallway. I was wondering, Dad, where are you going, you know? He goes, oh, you wait right there. He goes, I gotta go get the car. And he went, and that was the last I seen of him. Joe had no idea where he was, no idea that he now wore an invisible label which read moron. The school made sure at least 30% of the kids admitted had normal or near normal intelligence. The school needed those kids to work. He had to have somebody with a certain level of intelligence in order to run this place. In effect, you were very cheap labor.
We should be thankful that none of us ended up in a horrible place like this. The good news is that both Fred Boyce and Joe Almeida finally escaped from the Walter E. Grinold School by staging a rebellion along with 2 other friends. They set their dorm on fire and sneaked out to claim their freedom when they were 18. Unfortunately, it was challenging to start their adult lives with little education and no money, but they all landed on their feet. This is another place that started out with aims to educate people like my brother, but it became a dumping ground for unwanted children. There was an ideal of parole. If you were able to learn enough skills to support yourself, you would be allowed to leave. Very few residents were ever granted parole. There was little or no formal education for residents. Most of the focus was on teaching residents farming skills and tasks needed to keep the school running. The Belchertown State School was the biggest workplace in town. Most town citizens had paying jobs there. As the population grew, conditions got worse for the residents. Many of the most disabled sat around all day being watched by an employee. There was no learning or interaction or fun. Conditions got so terrible that human rights groups sued the state for poor treatment of the residents and inhumane living conditions. Here's a photo of how close together the beds were.
What about the state of Massachusetts? I mean, do they care? The administration will say care. Well, that's a good question, Brad. I really wish in my own mind I could say yes, but I've got great reservations. I think if they could come down and take the time and live with the situation, but they would have to react. They would have to respond. But then again, I don't. The only other way is the people themselves got to be aware of this. They've got to be aware of this, and then they'll make the state respond. I hope. Well, Senator Edward Kennedy is supposed to be quite interested in medical retardation as a member of his family. I don't want to say, Senator Ted, where are you? The governor, or later visited Belchertown State School. The governor was here in June. In a statement that he made to the press, found conditions of call. The legislators that they have here time and time again, the legislative commission investigating Belchertown State School around the state hospital. They too have made much of the same kind of statements and have written a report, which I'm not sure this is a quote, but it doesn't kind of a monumental disaster. And we're still here. Investigation after investigation produced a very main result. To win, conditions at Belchertown State School are deplorable, and yet things go on as they are. Why? The answer to that is not easy. It runs right into the very fabric of our society. I feel you and I and 180 million other people tolerate those conditions. Our society has always focused in on differences between people. You are different from me. A retarded person is different from me because I'm normal. But in fact, we should be focusing in on the similarities of people. The residents of Belchertown State School are more similar to you and I than they are dissimilar. And they have the same needs, they need love, they get angry, they bleed. We must begin to understand that when people can see them as human beings, not as some human beings, but as human beings, I think it'll be a little bit more difficult for them to tolerate the existence of such conditions.
I think I'll give it more time. Yeah, probably super.
Colby, what do we think happened with the video here?
It ended.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, there's still like 4 minutes of the video. Okay.
Back to the beginning. That's not right. That's the end of it there.
Okay, here, let me see if I can capture where we're, I don't know what I just did. I don't know what's happening. Okay, well, get rid of that.
That's good. Just past that.
It seems like there's no sound anymore.
Well, why don't you just, here we have the slides. You can talk to the slides.
Here, Colby, I'll pull up the last couple of slides for you.
All right.
Then you can just.
I need the presenter notes. Hold on.
Miss Scalisi, I got them.
All right. Well, I got it. Can you see it on the screen?
Just need a sec to pull it up.
See?
No, we need the actual slides. I know we're trying. Get it. Is that down? Person are you? There. Can you see it?
No.
Why does it keep doing that?
Before the introduction.
This is going away. That. What you need. I need to just find that. Where's the original for him? There we go. There it is. It's the movie. Okay. Can you read it?
Yeah. Okay, so leaving off of this slide, this video showed the frustration of the person who was running the Belchertown State School. He asked the government for money to make improvements to the place. Ultimately, the only way to end the suffering was to shut the entire institution. Next slide. By the 1970s, residents began getting transferred to small group homes and intermediate care facilities, or ICFs, where they got better treatment, medical care, and therapies they needed. Next slide. By the mid to late 1900s, asylums were being closed due to human rights violations and recognition of the benefit of small group homes and ICFs for providing care to people with disabilities. Next slide. With the introduction of psychiatric meds in the mid-1900s, many people with mental illnesses were released from asylums with the idea that they could take care of themselves or live with their families while medicated. Next slide. Here are some photos of what good care at an ICF or small group home looks like. Next slide. Unfortunately, many people with mental illness are not able to function independently and have become homeless. Though there are homeless shelters, there are not many mental hospitals left after the abuses that happened at the asylums. Next slide. Since most of the places that offer assisted living for people with developmental disabilities do not have openings, I investigated what it would take to start one here in Gilbert with another family. Next slide. It's expensive. Next slide. Oh. And then the next slide after that. Here are some things I will need to do in order to get this project off the ground. Figure out a schedule of duties for the employees like cleaning, cooking, and meal preparation, plan grocery delivery, and make weekly menus. Next slide. I showed you the history of abuses of people with developmental disabilities and the shortage of places for them to live to illustrate how important it will be for me to create a safe place for my brother to live eventually. Next slide. I'd like to thank my faculty advisor, Ms. Mancini, and my mentor, Ms. Mia Samsel. I'd also like to recognize Ms. Hirsch who helped me with this presentation. That's it. There's my works cited.
Nice job, Colby, and thanks for dealing with all the technological snafus. All right, so any questions for Colby? And I have Miss Chaff here in my little window here. Questions for Colby about his presentation? Colby, you did such a nice job. It was super, super interesting. I just have one question for you, and that is, what did you learn about yourself as a learner doing this capstone presentation?
I learned using my time management skills and using them more wisely, and knowing for this project I need to get like some of my results pretty quickly, and I was just figuring it out. and getting it in quickly, all those places. So
Nice. Well, you certainly showed some perseverance.
yeah.
Colby, I'm curious, as you were doing your research around the history of some of these past approaches with folks who were challenged in this way, what was the most surprising to you, or did you feel like you already knew a lot of this information going in?
Actually, I was most surprised with was how bad people were brutally abused. I mean, it just broke my heart. It really, it's a saddening thing, and people don't get treated, should not get treated like that at all.
There was one point where Miss Chaff and I audibly both gasped at something you said.
I mean, I knew a little bit about the history, but some of the things that you talked about, I learned from, because I knew that the conditions were poor and that they were overcrowded and poorly treated. But some of the things that you talked about were even more shocking than I realized.
Yeah. All right. Well, good job, my friend. You are all done.
Thank you.
And be performed with hard shoe or soft shoe. Here is an example of a group dance in soft shoe. Here's an example of a solo dancer dancing with hard shoe.
Wait.
History of Irish step dancing, first invented the 18th century, over 300 years ago. Dances were taught in villages in Ireland. Dance masters traveled from village to help spread the dance in Ireland. England tried to take away the, let me redo that again. So England tried to take away Irish independence and freedom in the 19th century. Ireland was then ruled by England. The Irish held on to Irish traditions and culture through Irish step dancing. Competitions were popular, and today many Irish step dancing is performed for competitions. River dance, Irish step dance, popular in the 1990s. Irish step dance costumes for female solo dresses are beautiful short dresses in bright colors. The favorite colors are green and white, but they use many other colors, bright colors too. The dresses have fancy Celtic designs based on an Celtic Irish book with beautiful drawings called the Book of Kells. Females wear two types shoes. Soft shoes are called gillies or pumps. Soft shoes are similar to ballet shoes. They are made from leather and crisscrossed at the top of the foot and tied at the ankle. Hard shoes are called heavies or jig shoes. These are similar to tap shoes, but have more material on the tips and heels. They make a tapping sound. Irish step dance costume for males. Male dancers wear in pants and a shirt with a colorful vest. Shoes for males. Males wear shoes called real shoes. These leather shoes have a heel so the dancers can dance making click and tap noises. Thank you to Miss Carew, my mentor, and Miss Hirsch, advisor, Miss Speringo, for helping me with this project. Also, thank you, Katie, for coming with me and dancing with me. Thank you. It's time to dance.
Oh, do you want to see what the first one is?
So the first one is called two-hand, which is in soft shoe. Second is hornpipe with hard shoe.
And I think you guys maybe can dance in this area here, and I'll turn. And are you going to get changed into? Yeah. Wardrobe change. Yes, this is the intermission, right? Okay, we're back after that short intermission.
Okay. Does any have any questions? I got hard shoes in Ireland. Not much. I think you're just laughing at me.
Dar?
Thank you. I believe I started when I was probably around like 12.
Shop.
No, I started when I was 6.
Charlotte?
Katie was dancing with me.
Char?
Kelly?
Oh. Charlotte?
Yes.
Hi, it's Mrs. S. What's your favorite? Hard shoe or soft shoe?
I would say probably hard shoe.
I like the hard shoe too. You did a great job, Char.
Thank you. Well, I like the hard shoe better because I just like dancing, going up on my feet with my friends. Yeah, and I like scalping
The sound?
with my feet. Yeah. Yes. I would say probably hard hike. Yeah, I'm gonna keep doing it. Practice makes perfect. Yes, Sammy, the one you were there. Like, you haven't demonstrated it? Here.
Wow.
Yeah.
It is.
You're not doing it. So, like, how do you think I did? What else?
Sure.
Nothing.
Please.
No, I'm fine.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the one that we had, that was, I'm trying to think, when did, that was probably the 90s. That's called the Celtic Knot. Right. And that was the 90s. That's when we first got this custom. Was in the 90s. So that was what was on the front. And on the back was another kind of a custom. And then now we have the cross. Do you have the cross? No, you don't have it. Same thing. These are
So we both have black tie stuff. We both have the same color.
so like 2007, 2008, we ended up with the cross. When my mom passed, who's the one who started the school, she, which is in hospital, she kept on saying, I want a Celtic cross on the front of the costume. And so she designed it. She, made the drawing, and it's like, okay, well, okay, we're gonna have a Celtic cross. So that's what we have now. And I just want to say, this is a dress that Terry wore, 60 years old. It's an Irish step dance. She wore when she was a little girl. Yeah. Maybe even a little. Maybe.
Charlotte, what did you learn by doing that?
I learned about in practice makes perfect. And I like hanging out with my friends so much. I love you too, Prairie.
Any other questions for Charlotte?
Yeah, do you have a question for me? No.
I have a question for
Yes.
you. Did you enjoy doing your capstone project?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can come up if you want to answer that.
Oh,
Oh, Yeah. In a restaurant I have. Yep. Mm-hmm. Any others? Yeah, we were trying to get our shoes, and you know what happened? The 5 size were way too big. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And thank you too, Katie. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Mrs. Faringo. Right. I know.
All right, everybody, thank you for being here. This is Christina Kalta, and this is her capstone presentation.
Best introduction I've had all year. Okay. So yeah, my name is Christina, and as you can probably see on the screen, I'm going to be talking about the parallels between psychological remedy and Orthodox theology. If that doesn't really make sense, how does the church treat mental health, and how does medicine treat mental health? AKA, how does this guy say something, and what does this guy say? Pretty self-explanatory. First thing I want to talk about is why I'm speaking about this topic. And then second thing is I'm going to talk about the psychological and medical point of view. Third thing I'm going to talk about is the Orthodox Christian point of view and how the church looks at it. And lastly, we're going to tie it all together and show that there actually are a lot of parallels. So before we start, I do like starting with quotes. And I chose C.S. Lewis because for those of you who don't know, C.S. Lewis, not only was he a Christian, but he was also a British scholar. You may know his books, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. This is the guy who wrote it. And so I just wanted to kind of get a quote that would explain why I'm doing all this. And so it's mental pain is less dramatic than physical pain, but is more common and also harder to bear. The frequent attempt to conceal mental pain increases. And it is easier to say my tooth is aching than to say my heart is broken. Self-explanatory because not everyone wants to be vulnerable in front of others. So why this topic? Hi, that's me, for anyone who didn't know. So one of the most obvious things about me once you start to get to know me is obviously my religion, whether that's the cross that I usually have on. I don't know why I don't have it on, but I usually have it on. The ink on my wrist or the way my dad is dressed. I am obviously, once you get to know me, a proud member of the Coptic Orthodox family. And I love my faith, I really, really do. And the culture and the tradition is what like my life surrounds it. My life is surrounded by it. And that is the center of my life. But there are a couple things that I have noticed that have been negative when it comes to mental health. A ton of people in the community that I grew up in don't talk about their mental health, but a lot of them struggle with it. And that exists in the Middle Eastern stigma of the culture. So I said that I was Coptic Orthodox. Coptic comes from the Greek word Egyptos, which means Egyptian. So I am Egyptian Orthodox. So that also refers to the native people of Egypt. So those of you who want to argue, I am the modern day Cleopatra. So anyone wants to say anything differently, not gonna happen. Yeah, so Coptic Orthodox refers to the Orthodox Christians who originated in Egypt before the Arab conquest. So I chose this topic to get a better understanding of where my religion stands when it comes to mental health and psychology. And to just, kind of get a little bit of a further understanding and to be like, just for kicks and giggles, this is a picture slide with me embracing my culture. That's me on Easter, me at a wedding, me with the bishop who was speaking Quo, just a lot of people who have got me to love my church and my religion. So now, I sent out a survey, and this survey was to kind of see how other people in my religion view mental health. Wasn't only taken in one spot, so it's not like it's only Connecticut that the church doesn't care about mental health. No, there are people from California, people from all over America, ages ranging from 15 to 23, who say almost the same thing. I'm going to go through it really quickly so I don't really go over time. And so Miss Scalisi doesn't kill me for killing her Friday night.
Girl,
is
it's
it
only Wednesday. You can kill my Wednesday night.
I don't know why I thought it was Friday.
Wishful thinking.
Yes. We still have finals tomorrow.
Mhm.
So I asked them, do you attend church services weekly? Almost 100% of them said yes. Do you have a good relationship with your priest, which is actually very important when it comes to mental health as a Christian? A little less of them said yes. 71% of them said that they do. 29% of them said that they have mixed feelings, which can contribute to mental health as a Christian. Do you think that being a Christian has shielded you from mental issues? 71% said yes, 29% said no. And this is a little bit of a misconception because being Christian will not shield you. It can make you recover faster, but it will not shield you from getting any form of mental health issue. Have you ever felt depressed in your life? Almost 65% said yes. Have you ever suffered from anxiety? Stats go a little higher. 80.6% said yes. Have you ever suffered from any other psychological distress in your life? Almost, again, 81% said yes. Now, this is where it kind of gets a little scary. If yes, what do you think you had? ADHD and SADS. SADS is seasonal depressive disorder. ADHD and anxiety. Depression, but I've never gotten tested. Depressed mainly from the fact that I have no identity of who I am as a person, which is a big issue in the church because there's a little bit of hypocrisy, not within, like in front of others, but within themselves, because they're portraying themselves as two different people, losing themselves in their identity. So not having an identity and not being strong in who you are as a person will lead you to be depressed because you're not strong from the inside and out. Panic attacks, bipolar. These are all things that people say, so I probably struggle with. And then again, OCD, eating disorders. Some of these may not be Christian based, but these are all things that people struggle with. But again, not a lot of them open up. Have you ever talked about a priest with your distress, about your distress? It was almost a 50-50 split, yes and no. You need to get it off your chest somehow, but almost 50% of them don't. Would you be scared to come to terms? Yes, sometimes I worry there's something wrong with me. No, because a lot of people deal with anxiety. Would you be open to see a therapist? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with wanting to see a therapist. No, I've heard horror stories that people are going to make it worse. Would you be open to take medications? Yeah, I want to get better, but I don't want to depend on them for the rest of my life. No, I don't really trust medicine and it's going to mess me up. Would you be scared to talk to your parents? Yeah, they're going to think I'm crazy and they're not going to understand me. No, because they want my happiness and my well-being. So I asked them if there's anything that they think that the church should touch on. And they said that there's a big stigma where all of us tend to hide how we feel, making us uncomfortable to talk to people. What else do you think? I think that there's a stigma that needs to be addressed and programs need to be talked about. I don't think it's talked about enough. I think our church makes us judgmental, which is actually the opposite of what the church should do. I think our parents should know more about mental health and should be invested in their children or not have children at all, which is a little harsh. And I think it's very stigmatized, but it should not be because this is preventing people from being brave. Now, if you think about all of these things, what is the one thing that pops up in almost every comment? The word stigma and the word judgment. Some scary stats are almost over 300,000 people in the last year have gone through at least one major depressive disorder, and that's less than 1.5% of youth. And what's even scarier is that 40% of people with anxiety and depression will not go see a doctor because of said stigma. So now, why are you so scared of a doctor? Now we're going to talk about the medical and psychological remedies that go about it and see that actually there is some religion tied into it. And one thing that many people don't know is that when you go see a therapist, one of the first questions they're going to ask you is, do you believe in God? Do you have religion? Because that kind of is protection towards suicide and towards self-harm. But it can't be the only protection, because if you are a therapist and you see that your person in front of you, it doesn't have to be Christian, it can be Muslim, it can be Buddhist, it can be Hindu, says that they are strong in their religion and will not take their life and will take their life, you will be held accountable because you as the provider did not give them the help that they need. One thing they're going to ask you is how long? How long has this been affecting you? Months, days, weeks? Severity. What level of pain is this person feeling? Are you self-conscious and don't like what you see in the mirror, or are you suicidal and are scared you're going to take your life one day? Functionality. To what extent does this interfere with the person's life? Example, depression stops somebody from enjoying what they once loved. If they loved art, don't really care for it. If they liked hanging out with their friends, they're going to cancel all their plans. It changes their ADL, and ADL is activities of daily living. Excuse me. And it's different for different illnesses. So if you have something like depression, it can kind of be found by talking. But if you have something like schizophrenia, it's developed later on in life. So you have to ask, is there a family history of schizophrenia? Is there any early warning signs? You talk to family members, you talk to friends to see if you can stop it from happening or stop the symptoms early on to try and help the person as much as you can. Now, I don't know about you, but I've heard the term, are you on your period, many times. And that can be true. You can be going through puberty and be down and depressed, but this goes back to diagnosis. If you have been depressed 4 months at a time, but you're on your period 3 weeks out of the 12 weeks of the 4 months, are you gonna literally tell them, no, you're only depressed because you're on your period? Are you gonna tell a guy it's because you're going through puberty that you're depressed? No, it goes back. You always want to make connections between the physical and the psychological, but you always need to check how long this has been going on. Duration is one of the biggest aspects of diagnosing mental illness. And psychologists now use something called the biopsychosocial perspective. They thought at first it was just your biology, and then they thought it was your psyche, and then they thought it was your social surroundings. And then they were like, no, it's everything. Your biology and your genes. Do you have any predisposition for illness? Are you genetically, do you have a genetic like heritage? Does people in your family have it? Yes or no? Your psyche. Are you in any mental pain? Are you just saying this is all in your head? Your social surroundings. Do you have healthy relationships? Are your friends good for you? Are your parents good for you? Is your home life good? Is your relationships good? Are you in a toxic or romantic relationship? But then it's actually everything. You can if it's just biology or if it's just psyche, but it's most likely all of it. So they assess every aspect of your life because that is the best way to get understanding into somebody's mental pain. Now, there are different types of therapy, as there is different types of medicine. First one, and the least severe one, is the prevention therapy. Okay, not feeling too good, what can I do? And these are just coping mechanisms that a professional can give you to try and get the patient to not decompensate. So these are just like, okay, let's talk it through. What are you gonna do when you have thoughts like this? If it gets a little more severe, we have more humanistic approaches to therapy, one of them being CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy. It gets the patient to recognize traps. So if you're kind of like an overthinker and you're like, oh my God, should I have said that? Should I not have said that? Oh my God, what's going on? Oh my God, I yelled at mom. Now mom's gonna think I'm a terrible child. I stubbed my toe, now my toe is broken. Like things like that, like where you're just constantly running in a million circles, a million miles per hour, and you're trapping yourself. You need to get the patient to realize this isn't real. It's all in your head. You need to get the patient to realize the traps that are being set for them. And you need to realize that your thoughts affect you. So you need to try and identify these traps and stop them. I'm going to skip inpatient for a second and go to residential programs. Now, for people my age, for most teenagers, this is probably going to be the most popular one. That's because you're surrounded by people who are like you, who are struggling with the things you're struggling with, and they teach you certain skills. They teach you to get back on your feet. If you need medication, they're going to give you medication, but they're going to make you realize that medication is just the band-aid for what you're suffering. You need to get to the root problem before you take medication, because what if you don't need it? You're going to be drugging yourself for what? And then psychoanalysis is going back to the biopsychosocial perspective. How do your relationships affect you? And then we go to inpatient. Therapy is kind of like a spectrum. You have prevention and then you have inpatient. Inpatient is where you're put in an institution for days, weeks, months, even years, however long you need to get better and however long you need to get back on your feet. Now, Orthodox Christian point of view, less depressing, less medicine, but still important. if I'm speaking personally, the church is a safe haven for me. And again, I really, as I talk about the Orthodox Christian point of view, I don't mean for this to come off as some form of Sunday school lesson, but I'm just talking about how the church thinks when it comes to this. Talk to various priests and they've all had one opinion. The church is a safe haven, but so many people are scared because they won't admit to mental health and because they think that means they're far from their faith, which could not be farther from the truth. I was talking to a priest and he was telling me that's the same thing like saying you broke your arm, that means you're far from your faith. Depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, these are all chemical imbalances in the brain. That has nothing to do with your faith. That's just how you were built. So what they don't realize is that the church and science really do go hand in hand. And it's really contradictory because the church never claims to be a mental institution. The church supports mental health, and the church will always be behind you if you are struggling with anything relating to mental health. And like I said earlier about the Middle Eastern culture, each individual church culture influences the church's view and masks the reality of what the Orthodox Church says. What the Coptic Orthodox Church may say may not be what the Greek Orthodox Church says because Middle Eastern culture and Greek culture may be completely different. So you don't really know what happens because the Arab and Middle Eastern culture here says, no, that's bad, but that's not really what the church says. And that's why there's stigma. Okay. Some also may say, no, you just got to pray more. Your spiritual canon is off. But this idea could not be more false. It's ironic because, again, the church never said your spiritual canon's off, you broke your leg, that means you just don't do anything. It's because, again, the church culture is what says one thing, not the church faith. Church faith never said that. And it's actually ridiculous because studies do prove that people struggle with mental health in every type of religion. But what people don't realize is that people with religion, proven in multiple studies, recover faster. But that's because they have something that someone who doesn't believe in a higher power don't have. They have hope that a supernatural being and a supernatural power can come and like Superman save them and wipe them off their feet. They believe, hey, can you just, I don't know, pray for me? Can you do this? That's all something that people who are Christian have and people who are Muslim have. People of any religion have, but other people don't have that. So it gives them an extra sense of hope and it gives them extra sense of, I'm just going to keep going because I have this backbone that others don't have. And the church actually has different things, pillars, sacraments, that can take a believer in a specific direction. And if you're not that strong of a believer, but you really don't want to stray from your faith, because that's what mom and dad told me to do, you can even turn to somebody as your guide. That somebody can be a Sunday school teacher, a family member, may not be the best option if you're a teenager, a priest, a friend. And we said confession, but what is confession? Is it Christian therapy? Well, first of all, when you talk about confession, you talk about sitting down with a priest, one you choose, one you trust, one you love, and you open up to him. And it's usually you telling him that you did everything that mommy and daddy told you not to, which is just fact. I'm not, like, speaking personally, I'm not telling my mom and dad what I say in my confessions. So it's, but what people don't understand, wrong priest, dad, not you. No, but like treating your father of confession as a therapist is not therapy. It is by no means getting you the help that you deserve as an individual. It's not fair to him and it's not fair to you. Now, some priests may not mind, and it depends on the priest and it depends on your relationship with him. Speaking personally, I have a great relationship with my priest. Not that one, but other ones. I do have great relationships. I love you, Dad, but I do have great relationships and they won't mind if I go to them. But others might, because you're turning him into Superman who can help you for everything and automatically change you up and make you psychologically sound. But at the other hand, you're putting yourself in a position where you're not getting the help that you really deserve. And unless before priesthood, he was a mental health provider, he will never be a mental health provider. He can have training to help you get the first steps to getting help, but he will never be your mental health provider. Again, these can be your first steps to therapy. Again, I don't know about you, but what my father confession knows is not what my mom and dad know. So they can usually take what they know and take the information and take their relationship with you and get to the root of the problem, even if that root of the problem is seeking a mental health professional. At the end of the day, it is up to the priest and his pride to realize this is not my fight anymore. you need to go see someone who will give you serious help. Now, this is not that. Confession is not therapy, and it will never be. So going back to the idea of guide, what do you look for in a guide? If I was looking for a guide, I wouldn't want them to judge me. I wouldn't want them to look down upon me. I wouldn't want them to resent me or hate me. They have to be non-judgmental, compassionate, loving, sincere. They have to be honest with me. How am I going to expect you to guide me if you're going to lie to me? But also, what do I want in a therapist? I want someone who's going to be non-judgmental, compassionate, loving, sincere, and honest. And some may argue, of course, these some are Christians, may argue that these values for a therapist are based on fundamental Christian values because, you know, America, medicine, a lot of it was founded by Christian researchers and Christian people. So this basis are by values that Christians hold near and dear to their hearts and what they strive to be. So I'm not saying that if you're not a Christian, you cannot be a therapist, but I'm saying that is where the overlap is. You may not seek a therapist out at first because you expect these same values from somebody you know in the church. Now, a lot of Christians think depression and despondency are the same thing. Depression is an emotional and mental ailment. Despondency is a faith-based ailment. And some may think that depression and despondency are the same thing. But what you don't realize is that some just mask depression as despondency. Going back to the whole, I just don't do enough church stuff. I don't go to church enough. I don't pray enough. I don't confess enough. Which, again, I really want to reiterate, I'm not trying to sound like a Sunday school lesson. This is just what the church says. It can lead you into depression. Again, going back to the idea of feeling torn within yourself. If you're not true to yourself, you can be depressed. And that despondency can lead you into depression because you keep asking questions and there are no answers for you. So I'm not going to say as a Christian, as a person in your identity, you just feel lost. You look for answers and those answers don't help. And especially if you're struggling with something like depression, anxiety, and addiction, you need connections. So that's why churches and religious leaders having connections into support groups such as Alcoholics Anonymous, Christian therapists that they would trust, any type of support that they would trust their children and their congregation is a great idea because you don't know how deep the problem is until you actually go looking for an answer. Now, let's tie it all together. Last type of therapy, I promise. This is, I talked to a person who's actually a psychologist prior to him becoming a priest. So he was able to kind of create a little bit of a Venn diagram for me. And he brought up something called the Ecolectic Model. Now, this model is where you kind of pick and choose how the therapy is. It's not really psychodynamic. It's not really cognitive behavioral. It's not really just problem solving. It's kind of a little bit of everything. And this can be kind of tailored to a Christian view. So this is where you take the specific needs of a patient and you personalize their therapy to what they need. So the researcher needs to be, or not the researcher, the psychologist or the professional needs to be very eloquent in many different types of therapy because you don't know what the person in front of you is going to need. So last part of therapy. So just kind of a brief rundown. Orthodoxy supports mental health in a faith-based way, encourages religion and God, uses tradition and sacraments before sending one off to a professional, but does not discourage one from going to a professional. You can speak to different kinds of help and different kinds of guides. And all of this is to support you in your mental health, not at all to discourage you and not at all to make you feel like you are less than of a Christian or less than of a good person because you suffer that way. Medicine, of course, there are various types of therapy. You can prescribe medication. You can be placed in hospitals. You can go see different types of professionals. But again, will not make you less than of a person for wanting to go see help and will not make you a bad person for wanting to go see help. Now, how do they tie together? I would have put this in the middle of the Venn diagram, but there was no space. You both acknowledge that mental health is very real. You can't tell somebody that it's all in their head if there's just a chemical imbalance in their brain. And they won't condemn you for suffering. That's not your fault. You didn't do this to yourself. I can guarantee you nobody's going to wake up one day and say, I want depression, and put themselves into a spot where they have depression. And both have their own humanistic approach to mental health. One being confession in the church, up until a certain point where the priest needs to say, you need to go see a psychologist. And the other one being just going to a therapist. There's nothing wrong with going to a therapist. Both acknowledge that you need to speak to somebody. And again, want to reiterate it one more time. The church really does recognize that mental health and medicine is real. However, both have the same criteria to break confidentiality. Going back to the idea of confession, there's something called the seal of confession. What I tell the priest in confession cannot be said outside of it. These are the things that have to happen if you tell the priest in confession, especially if you're a minor. If you say you're going to abuse yourself, you're going to abuse others, if you're suicidal or have self-harm. By law, they must contact authorities because if anything happens to you, they will be held accountable for not getting you the help that you deserve. And on that very, very pleasant note, I'm done.
Questions for Christina? Go ahead.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Jasmine heard two very impassioned presentations in the last 24 hours by her friend sitting next to her and her friend in front of her. Other questions?
I was gonna say that I feel that
Well, you know, being like a teenager, I'm kind of surrounded by a lot of people who suffer with it. And especially in the church, I would grow up with people who would tell me, you know, mental health is a sin. If you're depressed, you're a bad person. And I would see other people get discouraged by that. So it was kind of like wanting to find answers and kind of wanting to find the truth behind what religion actually stands for, and kind of wanting clarity for myself, because you're not always, you know, sunshine and sunflowers and roses and happy all the time. So I just also wanted some clarity for myself. Am I a bad person for being upset sometimes? So just kind of why I did that, Madam President.
Just to sort of jump off of that point that you just made, you mentioned in your presentation, might help if I take this off so you can hear me better. You mentioned in your presentation sort of the difference between what your faith teaches you, like the orthodox rules and ideology around it, versus the culture of the stigma that's associated with when someone's struggling.
Mm.
What do you, I mean, based on the research that you've done for this, what do you see as a way, other than presenting like you did tonight, to sort of make people more aware? How do you think you start to shift that culture?
Being spoken about more. It's kind of like a don't ask, don't tell kind of a thing. And a lot of people don't really open up and speak about it. But if more people open up and speak about it, it'll slowly turn into something that is, what's wrong with it? Like there's nothing wrong with it. So it's, the culture is intensified by the silence. So once that silence is gone and there's more awareness and people are more open to speaking about it and more open to like opening up and being like, hey, I need this help, then maybe that culture will start to die down, or maybe that culture will actually change and its opinion itself will start to shift.
Do you see that as the role of the church leadership or the members? But more.
I think it's in both people's hands to try and open up and start.
Kind of piggybacking a little bit off of Ms. Chaff's question, one of the things I wrote down is, do you think members of the church feel more stigmatized against getting help versus their less church-going peers?
Yeah, I do. Because again, the people who, I don't want to say run the church, but the people who are Sunday school servants and teaching the kids, some of them do have the idea that mental health is bad. So what's the idea they're giving off? Mental health is bad. Wow, this is my Sunday school teacher telling me mental health is bad. So mental health must be bad. So I think in the church, there's no really 100% opinion that's been set out. So once that opinion is set out, then maybe congregation in the church might not feel as bad. But again, going back to the idea of they think that things are separated from their faith and that God's mad at them. And there's like so many different ideas that are false, intertwined in the idea that mental health is really not that big a deal. You're depressed. just get help. Okay.
Mhm.
No one's gonna say anything. No one needs to know.
And I don't know if you were feeling panicked about all of the interview information that you had, so I don't even know if you processed it when you were saying it, but there was a discrepancy in the data that you presented, and I'll have to go back a million slides, so I won't right now, but right early on, you asked them, like, have you ever experienced, and like a really large percentage said no, and then when you asked them, have you experienced anxiety, and you named them all, the percentage jumped dramatically, so it was almost like, as saying mental health, you said the words, I don't remember your exact words, but it was something big in general, mental health disorder. And there it was like, no, I have not. When you named them all individually, it was like 80% yes, 80% yes, 80% yes. So it's almost like, again, whether that's stigma or whether that's not even thinking like, oh, well, yeah, I felt that way before, that's associated with mental health, whether they don't even make that connection. I just was like, I thought that was an interesting like discrepancy in their responses.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that. Like going back, yeah, actually, yeah, a lot of people I said, have you ever suffered with any psychological stress? A lot, like 65% said yes, but like 81% said yes to like anxiety and depression.
Yeah,
but that could also be because they're scared of the umbrella of mental health. And that umbrella is what scares people away. But saying I've been anxious and I've been depressed may not be as scary.
Right.
Yeah.
And it could also explain the delay in seeking mental health. Because, you know, if you're a little, you kind of overlook it until perhaps it gets really, really bad. Versus early on, as with any other disease, earlier diagnosis means, you know, earlier recovery.
Right.
So that in and of itself, not recognizing that having anxiety more frequently or being depressed for, you know, 4 months, for instance, out of the year is actually something that is diagnosable and treatable.
Yeah, really interesting. So I have one final question, and it is kind of stepping away from the topic and stepping outside of it into like the bigger project. What did you learn about yourself as a learner doing a capstone project?
When I pick the topic, research is really fun. When you like kind of pick something that you're like passionate about or like you really, really do want answers for, research isn't really as much of a task as it is something that I want to do. Like I noticed that like I really wanted to reach out to people. I really wanted to like take interviews. I really wanted to go out and talk to people because I kind of saw that each person had their own different take on the subject, but the subject itself, the basis and like the core was the same.
Yeah.
So I think again, capstone was just pick something that you want. When I picked something that I wanted, it was actually pretty fun. And it wasn't as much of a, I need to get my hours in as I made the hours coincidentally.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. So.
And you did a lot of interviews with, you know, of various priests in the religion, your faith. Was there anything that was a big discrepancy that you noticed, or was it all pretty cohesive?
It was all pretty cohesive, and each person had their own take on it. And each person would say something that one before didn't. So it was kind of nice to see how each priest, like within himself, will take on like congregate in front of him. I think, is there someone in the chat?
Yeah, you want to grab it?
Yeah, sure. Oh, that was just Miss Hall.
Great job. I think it's all the.
Oh, is that
chat.
all the ones? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Miss Hall.
That Mrs. Hall. All right. Well, very good job, Christina.
Thank you. All right.